Hey guys, how you doing? Luna here with a new video. Welcome back to the channel. Today I am really excited because we have a brand new episode of the Golden Trilogy where I take 3 or more albums released around the same time by the same artist and review them. Today is a really special episode because we're talking about my favorite band of all time, the Fab Four, the boys from Liverpool, the Beatles. We're talking about their early albums run, so we have Please Please Me, A Hard Day's Night, and Help. And the reason why I picked these 3 albums is because I think you can call this the Beatlemania edition. You know, everything they did before they went psychedelic and more groundbreaking and cutting edge, you know, experimental. And I think these 3 albums represent the key points of the Beatlemania year, so that's the reason why I picked these 3 albums for this video. However, as I always say, this is only my personal opinion, so if you have your own, and I'm pretty sure you do, you can go ahead and leave it down below in the comments, and I'll make sure to check it out as soon as I can. With that being said, let's just go on with the first album, Please Please Me, released in 1963. Me personally, I love this album. I think it's one of their most enjoyable records, and considering we're talking about the greatest discography of all time, you better believe these are 36 solid minutes of fun, catchy tunes. There's some really good covers here, but personally what stands out is the original material, like the intro song, I Saw Her Standing There, which has one of my favorite performances by Paul McCartney. You also have what in my opinion is the best vocal performance from Ringo we've ever gotten with Boys. As I said before, you have some great covers like John Lennon with Twist and Shout, or George Harrison with Do You Want to Know a Secret. There's not that much to say about this record because even though, again, it's a really enjoyable one, there's nothing new, you know, it's pretty much just a rock and roll album. And in the band's canon, this is not really the album that started Beatlemania. Beatlemania started with the US releases like Meet the Beatles or Introducing the Beatles, but those albums had a lot of the material you find on this record too. So being the band's debut, I just think this album is really important, you know, in the band's canon, so I wanted to include it on this video, even if I think that albums like Beatles for Sale or With the Beatles are better than this one. Also, it's remarkable how this album was recorded in one single studio session that lasted 10 hours. This album was recorded in about a little over 500 minutes, which is ridiculous considering how great everything sounds and, you know, how amazing the level of quality in terms of performance is. You'd think that after such a long amount of time playing the same songs, you know, trying to get it right would make the band feel a little bit tired towards the end of it, but no, this album is incredibly tight, the quality is really good, and, you know, even though this was released all the way back in 1963, the remasters of this album make this a pretty fresh listen as well, so definitely a great album and deserving to be a part of this trilogy. Now let's go with A Hard Day's Night, released in 1964. This album is 1,000 times superior to Please Please Me. It wasn't the direct sequel that would be With the Beatles, but this is the first time the band sounded so tight, and it's also the first time it was all original material in a Beatles album, which makes this album really important. Obviously, Please Please Me and With the Beatles had original songs in there too, but this entire track list is made out of original material by the band. And even though this album was originally thought to be a soundtrack for the Beatles comedy movie under the same name, A Hard Day's Night, released in 1964 as well, the album ended up being way more relevant than the movie, which in my opinion only serves as evidence, you know, to prove that this album is amazing. In my opinion, one of the greatest albums of all time, and yes, I'm not exaggerating. This record, from the first second, it's amazing. That initial chord that kickstarts the title track is incredible, memorable, catchy tune. Then you jump to songs like Can't Buy Me Love, Tell Me Why, When I Get Home, you know, Beatlemania at its purest. And in my opinion, this is also a really important record because it's the first time we saw John and Paul writing songs that, you know, showed a more romantic side to them, because yes, the band performed tracks like All My Loving, Till There Was You, P.S. I Love You. They weren't as good as songs like And I Love Her and If I Fell, which has a vocal harmony that's so beautiful, it makes me want to listen to the song on repeat for 10 hours and I wouldn't get tired. The band was even advised not to do an all-original track list, but, you know, they were ignored because they were confident in their craft, and the result is one of the greatest albums of all time, and in my opinion, a total 10, if you want me to say it like that. I mean, even the songs that didn't make the cut, like I Call Your Name, for example, you give that to another band like the Mamas and the Papas, and it's one of their most popular songs. So that tells you the level of quality of the songwriting on this album. This album is incredible, and it definitely deserves to be on this trilogy, and actually, depending on the day, I may maybe I think that this is the best album out of the three. Now let's go with Help, released in 1965. Another soundtrack album for the comedy, released on the same year under the same name. This album is not as balanced in terms of quality when it comes to the track list. It is still all original track list, so this is definitely another step in the right direction for the band, because it was the songwriting used on this album that gave birth to albums like Rubber Soul and Revolver. Because the fact is that on this album the band decided to go for new genres like pop music, folk, country, which resulted in some of the most beautiful and enjoyable tracks the band has ever crafted, like Paul McCartney penning down one of the most beautiful songs ever made and one of the most personal songs that Paul McCartney ever released, which is Yesterday. You also have John Lennon basically crying out for help in the title track. You have George Harrison writing one of his most beautiful songs with I Need You, which is actually one of the first times that George Harrison performed an original track on an album. However, that doesn't really mean that you don't have the Beatlemania type songs in this record. You have You're Gonna Lose That Girl and Ticket to Ride. You also have Another Girl, for example, an excellent song by Paul. You still have those songs that made the early years of the Beatles so enjoyable, but you have more mature songwriting on this album that I think led the band to do what they did in, the mid and late 60s with albums like Rubber Soul, Revolver, and even Sgt. Pepper's. I personally believe that even though this album doesn't have the same level of quality, and I'll explain why in a minute, as the other two I've mentioned on this video, it's because they were trying to do so many different things that I believe that they were not really worried about connecting them properly, which makes the album a little bit bloated in the sense that you have a lot of experimentation, not really in terms of like unique songwriting, but John Lennon trying to do Bob Dylan type songs and Paul McCartney trying to write more personal music. Then you have George Harrison being more and more involved in the songwriting. All of it came at once, and they were not really focused on one specific style or one specific concept, which makes the album a little bit all over the place. However, every single song on this record is excellent, beyond good. Every song on this album is excellent. Just because I say it's a little bit all over the place doesn't mean it's bad. It's not even half bad. This is a great record. But considering we're talking about the Beatles, you can tell the difference, in terms of cohesiveness and level of quality. Like, there's some songs in here that are significantly better than others, and that doesn't really happen on a Beatles album. Most of the times you have a record where every single song is a 10 or close to a 10. Instead, here you have a few tracks that are obviously not as good. For example, the Ringo song on this album, Act Naturally, is not really a song I enjoy at all. I think the performance is quite annoying, and I myself am a big fan of Ringo, so if I'm saying that, it's because, believe me, the song is not really that good. But overall, even though this would be my least favorite album out of the trilogy, I do think this record is extremely important because it closed this teenage, Beatle years in a really good way, and it showed what the path looked like, for Rubber Soul, what the band was going for. Shifting their focus, this time they weren't really worried about making music for the masses and making music that people will, Beatlemania fans will enjoy. They were more focused on perfecting their craft and making music that's groundbreaking, cutting edge, and unique to them, even if they were not going to be able to perform it live once they were on tour, which led them, to the making of Rubber Soul and Revolver, and essentially Sgt. Pepper's as well. After looking at this three albums and every other album from the Beatlemania years, it's remarkable how much the band grew in such a short amount of time. The Beatles released about 12 studio albums in their 7 years of activity. In today's music scene, you don't really see a lot of artists growing even if it takes 3 or 4 years for them to release an album. You don't really see that much difference between one or the other. Instead, the Beatles managed to create all of these different styles and approaches to songwriting in the span of a few years. They created this whole phenomenon, which is Beatlemania, and they grew out of it in 2 years, because Rubber Soul was released in 1965, Love Me Do was released in 1963. So in those 2 years, they managed to create a style and then grow out of it, which shows, the level of creativity these people had at the moment. And listening to this album in chronological order, Please Please Me first, then A Hard Day's Night, and then Help, and wrapping your head around the fact that this was, this entire thing happened in only 2 years is remarkable. And if you put Beatles for Sale and With the Beatles in that equation, is even more impressive. impressive, because with the Beatles you can tell growth and evolution in every single one of the albums. A wonderful trilogy, a trilogy that in my opinion represents the growth in a musician's mind, and yeah, one that I always recommend to people that haven't heard it, but it's the Beatles, so I'm pretty sure you already have. That'll be it for today's video, guys. I really hope that you enjoyed it. If you did, go ahead and leave a like on the video and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any other videos that I upload. Once again, I must say this is only my personal opinion, so if you have your own, leave it down below in the comments. You know I always love when you guys interact with the channel. It's basically the reason why I created this channel in the first place and why I keep uploading videos every week. If you guys have any requests and want me to do a certain video on a certain artist, song, or album, go ahead and leave it down below and I'll feel free to request as soon as I can. But with that being said, once again, I hope that you guys enjoyed, and I hope that I can see you soon with a new video. But until then, bye.